Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the weekly landscape update video I do here in this landscape in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. Thank you very much for following along. This is about a 2-year project now, a little over a 2-year project. The things in the back are, some of them are right at 2 years old. The things in the front when we move out there are newer than that. But the space is really starting to fill in, and so feel free to follow along with these weekly updates. I have this dear Dolores hydrangea. This is a remontant variety from the, this is a Southern Living Plant Collection one actually. And you can see how budded up it is, starting to flower, starting to show a little bit of color. It's a great plant, it really is. I thought it had been a little more damaged than it was during that cold snap we had back in March, but this one is remontant, meaning it will bloom on old and new wood. So even if these flowers had been completely killed back, it would still flower during the season. There's a Veronica here. This is its second year in the ground, and last year it was just a big, not much going on with it. And here it is in full flower, and it'll do that all summer long. Really great variety, and you see it's only about 15 inches in height. That's pretty much what it'll do all season. Some others will get much taller than that one. To the right of that, this one's kind of funny. This is a touch of gold holly, and this one has actually been in the ground for 2 full years now. It's a great, it's a gold foliage Hugendorn holly, and Hugendorn is absolutely one of my favorite Japanese hollies. I think it's a much tougher plant just in general than Soft Touch or Henryi, which are also Japanese hollies, or the gold versions of those. There are gold versions of those as well. But this gold Hugendorn, super tough plant. 2 years in a row, I let something fall over on top of it and it turned green. So this is the first season it's actually going to be gold. I haven't shown it at all because I planted it and it was gold, let something drop on, fall over on it, which was beautiful. It was marigolds the first year, and I can't remember last year what was laying on it. But anyway, it's going to be gold this season, and it is a great pop of color. And again, just a tough little evergreen plant. Grows in this little dome shape all by itself. And down here on the front, if you've been following along with the annuals going in the ground, those salvia there were from seed in the house. They were planted and then cut back in that video to about half the height they are now. So here we are, I think 2 weeks in the ground, and they've hopped up, and I saw a big old, they're not strong enough yet to support like a bumblebee on them, but yesterday I saw a bumblebee on one, he drug it all the way down to the ground. But that's a very popular plant with the pollinators. Viburnum nudum is now in full flower. Just such a great native shrub that, man, this was planted as a little 1-gallon container. You wouldn't believe that probably 20 months ago, maybe something like that, maybe a hair longer than that, this thing was about 12 inches high, and now it's taller than I am at 6 feet. Sliding over this way, I've got a new hybrid hydrangea I haven't talked much about yet, but this one's called Princess Bride. It's actually a hybrid of 2 separate species of hydrangea, and you can see how it gets these kind of yellowish flowers that then get wider and wider in time, and they're all along the stems, and this thing just blooms like crazy. I'll talk more about this coming up because this is an upcoming release from the Southern Living Plant Collection. I think it's going to be super popular, and man, I've done, even with a really nasty freeze on these buds back in the middle of March, look at all the flowers, and more are coming. You can see it's just getting started. Behind it is my Diamond Spire gardenia. This is an upright, narrow growing gardenia. This is actually Buddy Lee's variety, and he's the Encore Azalea inventor. For those of you who don't know, a lot of the plants in this, not a lot, but several of the plants other than the Encores that are in this landscape are his as well. We're going to get down there sometime in the fall and see Buddy again for sure. This is a great plant. There's so many buds on it, it's just wild. But this one goes upright and narrow, which is unique for a gardenia for sure. And of course, fragrant, super fragrant. It's kind of, I talked about a gardenia for a minute and a half and didn't say anything about the fragrance. I'm going to slip past the camera here and head over to this container that I've creating this 2-ball boxwood, that I think I got it from Lowe's. It's just a variegated boxwood that I've turned into 2 balls. I'm about to turn it into a third. Several pruning videos. One has gone up already as you're watching this. When the next one goes up, I will have pruned this thing back into shape. Nasturtiums that were done from seed in the house are starting to show some color. That was what was added to this container. I did a container planting video this week and didn't show this particular container, but it's got the boxwood, lemon coral sedum down at the bottom, and then these orange nasturtiums. There's so many things in this bed as I'm walking through it. I'm trying not to step on something. Lots of perennials returning from last year, lots of newly planted perennials. I talked about in the last a couple of these walk around weekly tour videos that are kind of in between flowers. You have these early spring flowering shrubs like the azaleas and things that were in full color, and this yard was just glowing, a month ago. And we kind of were in between as these annuals are starting to pop, which you've seen, and all the perennials are now at least budded up or starting to flower. We'll see some dahlias in just a second. Milkweed is an example of that. This is one that's returning from last year. If you do milkweed, especially milkweed from seed, the first year they may actually just sit there and do almost nothing. You might get a single flower. Sometimes they'll hit the ground running, but most of the time they won't. The second year they come back, they're super, super vigorous like this. So keep that in mind. And there's a lot of milkweed planted throughout this landscape. I'm going to try to slide out of this bed and show you something. Back here in the background, as I'm shooting this, it's 95 degrees. It is way too early for it to be 95 degrees outside, but it is. My potatoes are covered back there with a shade cloth, and yesterday was 91, today's 95, tomorrow's 91. I'm going to keep that cover on, and then after that we're in the upper 70s for a couple days. The cover will come off, but I'm trying to prevent them from 95 will burn those potatoes out. So especially in those black bags above the ground like that. So anyway, that's what you're seeing on that cover. Vegetables are growing like crazy. Tomatoes are halfway up the cattle panels at this point. And let's look at some dahlias. Let me step into this bed. These are seedling dahlias, meaning that we did these from seed. This is one that's returning from last year, so this was a color we would have known and seen last year. Others that are in here, if we go down to the right and down to the ground here, this one and the smaller ones you're seeing here were actually seedlings of the ones that were here last year. And so we don't know what colors those are going to be. They'll be all different colors, sizes, and shapes. They're all combining and recombining together as the pollinators come along and make this seed. I think I'm going to collect more of it this year, maybe sell some of it in the future, just because some of them are so interesting. But this is literally one that was done, some pollinator created this from a couple of these in this back garden. When we move over this way, this is the area that I keep the hybrids, the known named varieties. And over the next couple of weeks, these are the ones that have the larger, kind of dinner plate flowers, and we'll see these buds get bigger and bigger as the season goes on. Got to do some staking on these, but that's what this group is. These are the kind of known varieties that you would buy in a garden center or a store. The ones in that other section are ones that are, surprise, surprise, we have no idea what color they're going to be from season to season. The snapdragons have finally really put on a big show. It's 95 degrees out today, so I don't know how much longer they'll last, but finally getting some color out of these. This was a weird winter with the snapdragons showing basically no color until the last couple of weeks. And now they've jumped up and taken off. There's other things planted around them that will fill in, as these come out, because they will have to come out of the ground here in the next couple weeks, especially after a couple 90-degree days like this. So hopping out here to the front garden real quick, you can see week over week again, this will be 7 days since you saw last week's video, how fast these annuals can actually fill in. And I'm not doing anything special to them. They're not being fertilized constantly. They were planted in some compost and that's it. They were fertilized. This was fertilized earlier in the season. At some point I will refertilize my annuals with with an organic fertilizer, but for right now they're just, they've greened up. Almost everything in this bed except for the coleus was actually done inside the house. And the melon podium, I did buy this melon podium that's here, but everything else was done from seed in the house, and you can see how just great that's gonna look. We're another 2 weeks away from that just being, you know, being crazy, crazy colorful. Something I haven't shown in other videos is there is a Henryi clematis that was planted on one of the posts on the front fence. There's actually 3 clematis on the front fence at this point. Henryi has always been one of my favorites. That's an old variety from the 1800s, and it's still, you know, it's still one of the best. I mean, these, you know, flowers can be 8 inches across, and I frequently see that. It tends to bloom heavy in the spring. It's only going to have, you know, limited flowers this year, obviously, but it tends to bloom heavy in the spring, and then this one will come back and start flowering again in the fall. These were Liatris. I just want to point this out. These are Liatris that was done in a jumpstart video last year. I put these Liatris in a container in like March. They stayed in a container for a month. They went in the ground last year. Of course, they didn't put on a whole lot. You know, it's first year in the ground, but here they are coming back. And they should be quite colorful when they start flowering in a few weeks. There's a candy twist crinum lily in the front garden space, and of course this is another one. Was planted last year from a very small container, and you know, it takes them a year to get going. I've got 1 flower spike on it this year. These anchor themselves in the ground in a way that you just can't believe. You leave one of these in the ground for 10 years, it'd take a backhoe to get it out of the ground. A few flowers that have already opened and faded here, but there's lots more coming from the center of this. Just beautiful, beautiful flowers. 2 more hydrangeas starting to show off in the landscape. This is an Oakleaf hydrangea called Ruby Slippers. These flowers will gain more color over the course of the next few weeks, brighter and brighter white, and eventually fade to a pink, really dark pink. Actually, and of course, then it has the great fall color and, you know, all the attributes of an Oakleaf hydrangea in a much smaller package. This is a dwarf, 2nd year in the ground, so pretty impressive for a 2nd year shrub to have that many flowers on it, and they'll get bigger. Those fluorescences will get much bigger over the next couple of weeks. 1 more hydrangea further back in the bed. This is a variegated mountain hydrangea. So lace cap. Lace caps have the flat inflorescences. The outer part, the little what look like flowers, are just sterile inflorescences that draw in the pollinators. The actual flower part are in the center here, and we'll see more and more of that over the next week. This one's white with just a shading of pink. I've seen them pink, very pink, and then but more white or light pink. This one really doesn't need to flower. It has that beautiful variegation in it. It's leaning out perfectly into the light here. It's in a part shade condition, and it's leaning toward the sun. You'll be able to see all the flowers here as they open over the next couple weeks. But I really do love this variety. It's called Omaka Nashiki. And super interesting, again, with flowers or without. Week over week, the Empress of China dogwood gets more and more colorful. I think we're still a couple weeks away from it really being full flower. I'm gonna have to do a little pruning on that plant after it's past flowering. We'll take a look at that when the time comes. I'm definitely gonna limit up a bit from the bottom, maybe take a little weight off of this side branch that's pulled down this way with the weight of these flowers, but we'll do that in a couple of weeks. I wanted to take the opportunity to show off this little Bonnie Spirea. Always kind of tempting on these Spirea to keep them cut into little balls, but I think they look best like this, where they have this natural shape and they're allowed to, you know, put up these taller flower spikes like this. The way I'll go about pruning this when it's finished flowering is I'll just go way down in the plant and cut these flower spikes back after they're done, and that'll get the size back under control. And it'll just do this again the following spring. This is a very long bloomed variety, super colorful. Really love it. How can you beat it? I love the layered effect of this bed behind me, because these camellias bloom in the fall and going into winter. The Spirea is blooming in the spring. I've got a butterfly bush back there that'll bloom in the heat of the summer, Joe Pye weed that'll be during the heat of the summer, Shasta Viburnum that bloomed already this spring. So there's like, just in this one little space right here, something blooming kind of all the time, which, you know, really adds interest to this space. Got to be enjoying the Spirea here in front of me right now. So thank you guys for following along with these weekly landscape updates. Again, I think the annual color will really start to dominate this landscape over the next few weeks. They've really greened up a lot. And once they green up and really start to get the engine going, they can fill out super, super fast. I may go through and cut them off one more time just to make sure they're big and full before I just let them go for the summer. So thank you guys for watching and following along with the channel, and I'll be back with one of these next week.